Can you tell me, a bit about your background, your name, where you live and work?
Sure. So I'm Margaret Moore, also known as Coach Meg, and I have had two careers. My first career was in the biotechnology industry, which was in Europe. I worked in the UK after a term of my MBA degree at London Business School. And so I spent 17 years in the world of developing and marketing new medicines. So the sort of high technology side of medicine. And in 2000, 12 years ago, I made an enormous leap out of that world into the world of preventing and disease, well-being, and coaching. And I started a company called Wellcoaches Corporation in 2000 in order to build the standards for a new professional in healthcare. Basically a health and wellness coach who was skilled at helping people take responsibility and really be on top of their own health and well-being. And so today I lead a company of about 30 people. We're virtual, so I work from home in Wellesley, Massachusetts. We train about 1,100 coaches a year.
Wow.
A total of 5,000 in 33 countries. And we have a core program, we have an advanced program, we have workshops, webinars, we do a lot, we write. I've just got a book coming out in January called Organize Your Mind, Organize Your Life, which is the beginning of mapping neuroscience and coaching in health. I had the idea and co-founded the Institute of Coaching at McLean, where we are sitting today. I worked with Carol Kaufman on a project that developed a theory for the intuitive dance of coaching, and our collaboration led to this institute. So I co-direct the annual coaching conference here. And my other job is to co-lead a national consortium for credentialing health and wellness coaches. So the goal there is to develop standards for a certification, for training and education, and to build an international coaching research effort to position health and wellness coaching in healthcare and in consumer wellness.
Right.
So I'm really focused on building the field of coaching in healthcare.
Yeah. And what's your background, educational background?
So I have a bachelor's degree in biology. So I'm a biologist first. And I have an MBA.
Right.
And both from the University of Western Ontario in Canada.
Right.
And so it's interesting right now because the biology of coaching, the neurobiology of coaching, and the psychology of coaching are coming together, including via positive psychology. So it's a very wonderful time to be in this field because my two worlds are coming together now.
Yeah. And how did you learn about coaching?
Well, I have to say I was very naive when I started Wellcoaches because I'd never met a coach.
Right.
I worked in a very eccentric industry in biotechnology, which is quite far removed from other industries. But I was known to be a really good project manager, and I enjoyed coaching other people, what I thought was coaching other people. And I enjoyed that as much as I did building businesses.
Right.
So I was very actively engaged, particularly in helping scientists grow into the business world.
Right.
Because in biotech, there are a lot of academic scientists coming. So I've coached a lot of people through that process over many years. And so I had a sense for, first, that particularly in health and wellness, people didn't have a project management structure. They had no accountability, no planning, it just all fell by the wayside because there was no structure. So that was my original idea. And then I really believed that the personal relationship was the thing that was going to make the difference.
Yeah.
And the third thing is that I felt that in health and wellness we had siloed into, exercise, stress management, mind, body, now, positive mental health, eating, nutrition, weight management, hypertension. Everything was siloed, and of course in the life of a human being it's all together, it's all integrated.
Yeah.
If you don't sleep, you're tired. You don't exercise, you feel stressed. You eat badly, you don't sleep. It's all intertwined. So my original idea was that we needed a coach who could provide the structure could provide a holistic approach and provide the relationship. And so that was my initial idea.
Right.
And then when I got into coaching, what I found back then was that the training programs for coaches, life coaches, executive coaches, had no scientific foundation.
No.
And so we had to build that from scratch. And so that's really, my real contribution has been to write the first coaching textbook with my team in healthcare, and to really connect the dots from theory to coaching practice. So that is my sweet spot.
Right.
And that ties in with my biotech background, because biotechnology is all about science to medicine.
Right.
And so I was very accustomed to being that bridge.
Right. I'm very curious about your training in coaching, because I had difficulties myself finding evidence-based training programs.
I self-taught.
Right.
I built it.
Yeah.
So I really had to, it's a long story how all the pieces came along, but it was really a matter of building it. I had a framework.
Yeah.
I brought in, Gabe Heistein did her PhD under Jim Prochaska, that's transtheoretical model.
Yeah.
One of my colleagues is an expert in appreciative inquiry. Then Carol Kaufman introduced me to positive psychology, so I've been going to those conferences for years and years.
Right.
And initially, I viewed it as the realm of life coaches, and then eventually I woke up and said, this is health.
Yeah.
It's mental health.
Yeah.
So, and then it's just built and built and built.
Right.
So I am a junkie for theories.
Right.
I didn't know that I had this skill when I was in biotechnology. I had no idea.
No.
But I really am, and so the translation of theory to coaching is really my work, like in my field.
Yeah.
It's been, not that I'm not alone in doing it, but that's really what I did. And so, and the other thing that I did, because I didn't see, I found out early that people thought they were coaching already. Everybody in health and wellness thought they were already coaching. So I learned quickly that the only way I was going to teach them that they didn't know what a coach did was to do it. So I did demonstrations from very beginning. And what I learned from Carol Kaufman is that psychologists and therapists don't do demonstrations.
No, yeah.
So I learned to coach. I put myself on a stage coaching at the very beginning. And so I got to the place where I could do that comfortably, coaching in front of the public. And so because of that, it forced my skills up fast.
Yeah.
Because if you have to produce results on a stage in 15, 20 minutes, half hour max, you have to really be able to get breakthrough insights quickly.
Yeah.
So that I was kind of forced to show what it was in order for people to say, that's not what I do. I get it. That's not what I do. And so I learned a lot from but I didn't go through another coach training program because from what I saw, I knew I'd be frustrated with the lack of scientific foundation. And second, I didn't want to inadvertently steal someone else's intellectual property.
Right.
Which you can't help.
No.
Once you learn an idea, you can't put it back in the box.
No.
And so I have intentionally stayed away from other training programs and sort of built it from scratch. What I have found is that many coaches who've gone elsewhere for training come to our school and say, gosh, you have explained to me why the others taught us this. Now I understand the scientific rationale. Like the simple idea, you remember at DC. So if you know that a core human drive is autonomy, then our job is to dig out the autonomy from life's clutter, which means you have to make the client do the work. And that means you have to get them to think hard, to get their brains working. And that's the real reason why you don't want to give the answers easily. But it's all linked to self-determination and autonomy, and nobody, that wasn't baked into a lot of the intuitive-based coaching. Anyway, you kind of get the picture.
Yeah. I have a question. I haven't written it on my guide here, but it's because when I meet people, they sometimes ask, so what is your coaching background? And I say, well, I have this and this and this training course, but it's only 2 days here, 3 days there. It's not a coaching education. And I don't know how to feel about it, because people are kind of looking for an answer. What's your 20-day education or 30-day education? And I don't have that, and I feel a little bit bad about it. But then when I reflect on it, I think, no, I shouldn't feel bad about it, because I haven't been able to find.
Right. Yeah.
So how do you feel about it?
Well, I mean, we've built one.
Yeah.
And our advanced training is a year long, and I can show you the model. We don't need to go into it now, but I can tell you a little bit. I can actually talk about it when we talk about how we integrate positive psychology. But I have a curriculum developer whose name is BJ, who is a psychologist who did intern at McLean a long time ago. And she's disabled. She's very ill with mitochondrial disease. And BJ and I have built an intellectual framework for coaching that's science-based. And so we've built one, and now we have it translated into an advanced training, which you might want to look at.
Yeah.
And it is the basis for a master's degree.
Yeah.
And so one of my ambitions is to look at creating it. So I think we have a model that's science-based. Right. I can't speak to the other schools,
no,
where they're at. You know, I know in detail. I mean, Fielding is working on this. You know, there are a lot of graduates. So I think we have cracked the code.
Right.
At Wellcoaches. I have no doubt about that. And then, you know, and then I use Wellcoaches materials in the Institute's work. I don't hand it over, but you know, like I think Bob Keegan's subject-object theory is central to coaching, and it's not being taught. No. And we have found a way to teach it. Right. Because if you can help people move from being subject to their beliefs to being objective, then they grow. They have insight, and they have new connections in their brain, and then they are on the spiral of change. And then Keegan's immunity to change model gives you a nice roadmap as a coach to follow that. And then we've linked it to other concepts. So you need mindfulness before you can see what you're subject to. Yeah. So you have to sort of imagine that your mind and your brain are separate. Yeah. So which means you have to have a concept of mindfulness in order to move to subject to object. Yeah. And then you need the conditions to do that, because it's hard to change your worldview, and that's where positivity really comes in. Right. So we've created a way of thinking about this. But our advanced program we just finished a beta over the last year, so it's new. So I think that, and then I have a book coming out called Organize Your Mind, Organize Your Life, which is a neuroscience basis for coaching. Right. So I think, well, I am certainly out in front, and others will come along, you know. But I think it's not, you know, there hasn't been anything. I would agree. There's nothing that would have satisfied my appetite. No.
And so what I'm curious about is your feelings about being self-taught, your feelings about having to have created yourself.
Yeah. Well, someone has to start somewhere.
Right.
Somebody has to start. It wasn't out there, and so I consider myself fortunate to have the right brain for this task at this moment in time. Right. And that the world is awakening to this, the need for this. So I think that I was really lucky to have seen. I mean, when I started, I had no idea this is what I would do. I had no idea. No. But it turns out that I am really good at coaching, reading the literature, using it, and teaching it. Yeah. Integrating, innovating, you know, into a system. You remember at DC said to the Positive Psychology Conference, there needs to be a meta model for positive psychology. I think I am on the way to a meta. I think we have a meta model, and I think we're now connecting it to neuroscience. And so for the domain of health and wellness coaching, there's still another 20 years to go. Or I mean, it will probably not stop anytime soon, but I think in 10 years the foundation is there. Right. I can see how everything's connected now. Right. Which really starts and ends with self-determination. Right. And what happens in between is what coaches do to make that happen. You know, we're still learning a lot about how the relationship causes people's brains to work better. Yeah. You know, there's a lot of theories about that. And so there's a lot more to do, but someone, you know, if it's not there and you have the ability to create it, it's a vacuum. You step in and I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm not afraid of stepping into starting with a blank sheet of paper. And it's that fearless, I think I can figure this out. Because in a way, what happens with psychologists is that they get very narrow in their domain, their way of looking at psychology. And because I'm not a psychologist, I didn't see any boundaries.
No.
I just went wherever I thought that, and my organized mind could integrate the stuff. So it's a beautiful example of having the right talent at the right moment in time.
Yeah.
And I'm not speaking to executive coaches, and I'm not speaking to life coaches. I'm in a very specialized domain, so some of it may translate elsewhere, some of it may not.
Right. And so who do you typically coach now?
So I have a small coaching practice of executives. I have probably 6 clients right now that are CEO level or that level of executives. And I focus on helping them improve their health and wellness, connecting it to their performance, and including positivity and positive psychology. The need is that we have a huge healthcare crisis here, in that the next healthcare and next financial crisis is related to the fact that 70% of our costs are related to diseases that could be prevented if people took better care of themselves.
Right.
And much of the stress that gets in the way of taking good care of yourself happens at work. And the vast majority of executives around the world believe that if they put their health first, their business will suffer.
Right.
That's their worldview.
Yeah.
And so the the transformation that needs to happen at the top is that they learn that if they put their health first, their business will get better.
Right. Yeah.
That's a huge change in mindset, and that's my niche.
Right.
Is to help them.
Right.
So they usually start by saying, my performance is, the best possible, but, I've got a few issues here. And then a few months later, my God, I had no idea how my mental and physical health could change my work and my relationships and my teamwork. So that's my niche.
Right. And what issues, when they come to you, what issues do they present?
It varies from having a health condition like hypertension, diabetes, heart disease. They're in their 40s and their 50s. Our biology isn't perfect, so things start to go wrong by then.
Yeah.
And they may not be really ill, but they're heading in the wrong direction.
Right.
So that's usually what creates the interest. The other is stress and sort of tension and negativity, and resilience. So that's where the positive psychology fits.
Right.
So it's and what happens is they come in for one reason and they have other things that emerge. So it's usually about it's a health issue to start, and it can be stress or physical.
Right. And so how does it look like coaching engagement? If I didn't know, if I was a client and I wanted to find out whether or not I should start with you, what would you tell me about how you coach?
So I recommend that the time frame for thinking about change is a year, so that you know that whatever changes you made you can sustain, and you can't be sure in health that the habits you've developed are going to actually last. But the intense part is usually in the first few months.
Right.
So I have a number of assessments which we'll come to, and there's a sort of what I call wellness planning phase, where I'm getting a lot of information. They're really learning about their health and wellness first, and then we build a plan, and it's in a document. It's fairly lengthy. I can show you the outline, and that plan I then add their progress as we go. So it can end up in a few months as a 15-page document.
Right.
It's a real picture. Some of them put charts in, some of them put, they're really detail oriented and they track everything. So the plan is a vision, And the vision has, on a personal level and a corporate level, you know, it talks about their motivation, it talks about their confidence, then where do they want to be in the next 3 months, and what are they working on right now.
Right.
And then every quarter we update the goals. And I usually don't have to work weekly with them because executives are not lacking confidence. And so once they get pointed in the right direction, you know, they can figure out so we're really kind of working on a quarterly, you know, level. Like this quarter, I want to get down another 15 pounds and I want to do these sorts of things. And then, so initially we usually have 1 hour sessions. There's usually 3 or 4 in the first couple of months to get started. And then after that, it depends on the client. Usually monthly, and then it goes to quarterly, and then, you know, and then it just depends on it. Usually, you know, the intense work is done early,
right.
Unless they want to re-engage on a new topic.
Right, right.
And then you go back into more intense. Usually at a year, they have made, you know, huge transformations, and after that, it's maintenance mode.
Right, right.
Which would be whatever it is, whatever people want.
Right.
You know, usually, I mean, once a quarter. And I like to think of wellness coaching as being similar to financial planning, you know, where you want to look at your finances carefully once a year.
Yeah.
You go to the doctor, you get your numbers, you look at your blood pressure, you look at your cholesterol, you know, everything, and then you build, you know, what's my plan?
Yeah.
And executives get executive physical assessments, so they get, you know, they go to Mass General for a day and have everything done, you know, from looking for melanoma to, you know, they get a complete assessment. And so it's good to look at it every year and say, okay, where am I? Am I on the right path?
Yeah.
And so the relationships go on forever, but the intensity is at the beginning.
Right, right, right.
Now, what I am now doing, I've just begun to do a lot more with positivity.
Yeah.
And that I don't know whether they can get it and go on their own, or whether they'll need more sessions. It's hard to know. Because because what happens in my world is in the executive world is that they then go to all their employees and then they try to implement it for everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
Because and they sort of think about it in terms of employee engagement as well as employee wellness. So that's become a broader, like when you work with one corporation instead of one individual client, that's a new game for me. So I don't know. You know, you have to kind of go
Right.
see what they need.
Yeah.
But individually, you know, it's intense for say 6 months, and then they usually have kind of gotten over the hump.
Right. So just to make sure I understand correctly, so you have some assessments, and then you have a first session.
Yeah.
What happens in the first session?
The first session is to just really a dump of tell me what's going on, you know, like what's the history of this, what has worked, and I bring in a doctor, Pam Peake, who is you could call her a lifestyle medicine doc, and if they have serious medical issues, then they have a consult with her too, because she as a doctor has the authority to say, look, this is serious,
yeah.
In a way that I can't. Because people can take it, you know, they say, oh, my blood pressure's a little high. So I use a physician when I need it, not all the time. So that's part of the startup too. So there's a intake, usually 2 sessions. An intake session, which, you know, just learning about, kind of pulling it all together, all the data, the medical results, you know, the lifestyle history. We have a well-being assessment, which really gets at lifestyle issues, and then they send me their medical report from their doctor.
Yeah.
And then they do a few other positivity. I ask them, what are the top things that make you thrive?
Yeah.
And just what would your closest family and colleagues recommend?
Yeah, yeah.
For you? So questions like that. I can show them to you if you want. And then I have a 2-pager on positivity ratio. So I get them to do their positivity ratio several times over 2 weeks. And then we look at that too.
Right, right.
And that's usually new to them. Most of them are now reading the book, Positivity. They didn't necessarily do it up front, but when you do it in a team, one person says, you know, I've just done this, and change the way I talk to my spouse, and then someone else gets interested. And so I like it when they're each privately coached, but then they're talking to each other about, for instance, when I went to a retreat with this one team, I said to them, we're not going to press you on many things, but you really need to build muscle mass at this age for all these reasons. And half of them all went out and got personal trainers.
Right.
And that was big.
Yeah.
It was a big aha. And now, of course, they're strong. So there's the assessments, and then the next stage is the planning.
And is that in the first session, second session? Or?
Second session is planning. We do that if we can face to face.
Right. And but the first session that's also face to face.
That's no. I mean, it varies, but you don't really need to do face to face for the inventory. It's more like an inventory. No, it's good to do face to face for the initial planning, and then we move to phone.
Right.
But the plan, you look at it every month. Is it still the right plan? I write up the plan based on their words.
Yeah.
And that becomes the record.
Right.
Detailed record.
Right. And so they see it, or is that your document?
It's theirs.
It's their document.
I do it for them. It's a service for them.
Right. Okay.
Not everybody does, but I find that they're not used to thinking about things in this way.
No.
Their health in this way. They've never written a plan for their health.
No.
And so they appreciate that.
Right.
Because in a way I act as the archive. Because they forget where they came from. They're too busy to keep track of things.
Yeah.
And also I want to be able to show them after a year. Here's 20 pages.
Yeah.
Read through.
Right.
This is what happened.
Yeah.
And then it's like a journal of, wow, look what, and then they remember, this is where I was at last February or whatever. Right.
And the assessments, do you use other positive assessments, like not just the positivity ratio, or?
The positivity ratio is the only, you can't do a lot of assessments at the beginning because they don't, they hardly know you.
Right.
They don't want to do a lot of assessments.
No.
Usually positivity is so new, at least now in today's world. I wish the mistake that I now I send the positivity book to new clients.
Right.
I just say, it's my gift.
Right.
Because it's the science behind a lot of positive psychology. I mean, I have my own way I use it.
Yeah.
But it's the simplest tool that says, this is where I'm at in terms of my mental health.
Right.
It's real simple. And they get it. And they get that it goes up and down.
Yeah.
And they start to think about what makes it go up and down.
Yeah.
And then they start to think about, how to do more of it. And so I think it's the easiest one to use.
Right. And so do you use assessments later?
We go back to the well-being assessment, and then we look at the labs, the blood work, weight. So we're tracking weight and blood pressure and all those things.
Right.
We have a long well-being assessment, which has all the, how often do you exercise and do you eat fruits and vegetables, that stuff. So that gets done again. The positivity ratio would be repeated if they wanted to improve it.
Right.
A lot of them have high ratios. So if your ratio is 8-to-1, you really don't need to.
No. And so what happens? They fill it out online, or?
Yeah, and then I give them a table to fill in the numbers.
So and they do that, hand it to you, send it to you?
Yeah, they email it to me. Right. So it's a document they can fill in. It's a form that they can fill in.
And you look at it, and then what happens?
We talk about it.
You talk about it in the session or on the phone.
Yeah.
And so what do you typically say or ask, or?
Well, the purpose of doing it is to find out whether there's a need to work on it.
Right.
So after they've done it, I have to do a little teaching about why it matters.
Right.
And that's when I have to make a decision. Is this something that they want to focus on or not?
Right.
And so sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not.
Right.
And so it just depends. If you have an executive whose ratio is below 2, then it is really worth repeating.
Yeah.
If it's above 4 or 5, I don't see any value in trying to get it higher.
No.
I mean, they're fine.
Yeah.
you have to go where people's issues are.
Yeah, yeah.
And if they don't have a positivity issue, what happens though is that what's happening with one client right now is that one person's benefiting from it, and now they're looking at it. I just wrote, this is new, I just wrote 2 pieces on the Losada ratio. I went back and read about all the math.
Yeah.
And I wrote them for the Institute, and I sent them to my clients. So that's new work.
Right.
And I had an interview with Losada himself.
Oh, right.
And so we're going to talk about that separately.
Yeah.
And I don't have the ability to teach the butterfly. There are a bunch of dimensions.
Yeah.
But the notion that there are these multiple dimensions, it's not just positive emotions. I mean, the way I view it is that the multiple dimensions have positivity, and then there are other kinds of positivity that trump that are really, really important. Meaning and purpose, inquiry, curiosity, and positivity, and then allowing yourself to be truly influenced.
Yeah.
That's Lassalle, and so I am beginning to talk about that in sessions, and I don't know whether I don't know what'll happen.
No.
But I have the nonlinear mathematical modeling has really changed in the last couple months the way I look at different phenomena like physical health, and so I talk to clients about finding your formula. And the formula will have multiple elements. And the butterfly is a great metaphor for when you get all of the elements working, like one gentleman whose diabetes has been turned around after 8 years with it. Now his blood sugar was never in a healthy range.
Right.
And he found the formula.
Right.
There were 3 or 4 things that he put into place, and he is like,
right.
He's got it.
Yeah, yeah.
He's lost 40 pounds.
Oh, wow.
It's no struggle. He has tons of energy.
Yeah.
He can exercise, and he couldn't. Long story. So I'm using the butterfly metaphor as a way to say this is a complex system, and there are several variables, and your variables are your own variables, because no one can do research and show it's too complicated, to link outcomes to the butterfly. So I use the butterfly as a way to show that there's a tipping point, and there's a combination of things, and you need to experiment until you find your formula.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the most important concepts that I use. I believe that people's wellness usually is driven by that kind of model, a non-linear model.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What about interventions? What do you do for interventions?
I use character strengths, because I never know what will come out.
No. So how do you use it?
If I think that there's benefit, I suggest, I don't do it at the front because there's too much. I have one client right now, the breakthrough insight was that of her top 6, she was using 3 were things like persistence, prudence. 3 were spirituality, zest. And what came clear is that those fun ones were not turning up at work.
Right, yeah.
And they weren't really that well developed in her life.
Mm.
And the breakthrough was appreciating that she had them.
Right.
That she just wasn't tapping into them.
Mm.
But you never know what's going to come out of it. You never know.
No.
Whether it's helpful or not. I like the character strengths. I mean, I also, we teach the Strengths 2020.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a really valuable way of thinking about strengths. With executives, a lot of the time, they've done 360s, they know their strengths really well. So the strengths, the other end of the market where I train coaches and I do coaching demos is the people who are overweight, who are not executives, and those people really benefit from, the average person who's really not high up on the ladder, they really benefit.
Right.
That the real place for positivity ratio and strengths in health and wellness coaching is for the people who have serious issues.
Yeah.
Who are, like, obesity is a big one.
Yeah.
When I coach someone, and it's not an ongoing, it's a demonstration. I just did one this week. She realized that when she's negative, she makes bad eating choices.
Yeah.
And when she's positive, she makes good eating choices. And she has 3 daughters. And it sounds like she has 4 daughters. It sounds like 3 of them are overweight. She didn't say.
No.
And the negativity, she really got that.
Right.
So my conversation with Barbara Fredrickson was, do you think that one of the reasons that we have an obesity epidemic is because people have positivity ratios that are under 3 to 1, and then they don't have the resilience to change their lifestyles.
Right.
So that's my belief.
Right. Yeah.
That low positivity ratios are contributing to the obesity epidemic.
Right.
But I don't find it matters at the top.
Mm.
It just depends. Some of them need it, some don't. So it just depends.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you know how it is with coaching.
Yeah,
You have to go in with an open mind,
Yeah.
and then you pick what you think might help
Yeah.
now.
Exactly.
And you wish, I really wish he'd listen to me about this, or he'd take an interest in this. But if they don't,
Yeah.
I'd let it go.
And so that
So you plant a lot of seeds, and
Yeah.
then maybe later they come back. You remember you sent me that thing? Like, I have a long publication list, and some of the clients want that one, and they're interested in this one, and
Yeah.
I don't know. So I just tell you, this is what I've written.
Yeah.
If something's of interest, let me know. And because I've got articles on body intelligence, BQ,
Yeah.
like EQ, which is new. The organize your mind stuff. I have a lot of stuff, so I just sort of let them find the thing that appeals to them.
Right.
I just put together a 5-minute webinar on mindfulness and a new meditation I learned, because I find executives don't like a lot of it out there. So I just finally did my own, and I'll see whether they like that.
Right.
How I think about mindfulness and why I think it matters in a way that's not soft and, that kind of
Yeah.
voice. And the executives go, I can't imagine meditating,
Mm-mm.
get me out of here.
Yeah. So what other, do you have other principles that you kind of follow? So you let them choose, you don't know in advance what's relevant, and
Well, my goal in coaching is transformation. And so transformation comes from a change in your mindset and your behavior together.
Yeah.
And so I'm always looking at the beginning for what is the transformational piece here, even if it's not in the vision. But I encourage people to think about that. What would transformation look like for you? So that's, my eye is on that ball.
Right.
And so then everything is about, how do we shift mindset?
Right.
What can you do that's new that would make you look at something differently?
Right.
And so I'm just looking for the thing that will make people say, like when I started off with the CEO on Positivity, he said, where's the science? So but he didn't read the book.
Mm.
And I sent some articles, but he didn't read Fredrickson's articles. He didn't. Now he's interested, and so now, he really, he did. So now because I had a feeling from the dynamic of the interactions that he needed more positivity.
Right.
It happens with CEOs. They're all down to business.
Yeah.
And they're gap-oriented, weakness-oriented.
Yeah.
And one exec, when you talk to a few, you just get a sense for, there could be more positivity here. But he wasn't ready.
Mm-mm.
So I have an eye. So for me, it's about changing mindset.
Yeah.
To a thriving mindset.
Yeah.
Whatever that is for people.
Yeah.
So I have a model of where I want people to go, which is that they're, if you've seen my DNA of well-beings, they have a really robust sense of meaning and purpose, that they're in flow using their strengths, that they have a high positivity ratio, and that their physical energy is really great.
Right.
And then the backbone is their relationships.
Right.
And so that's how I've organized positive psychology. And so that's my model of, and so I'm looking for parts of that model for people that might be lacking.
Right. And do you use other positive interventions or other types of interventions in
I other than character strengths and positivity ratio, and I mean mindfulness, strengths, positivity, mindfulness. I haven't. I mean, I do visualization occasionally. the count your blessings, the gratitude stuff, I just find honestly, most of the interventions, Sonia's interventions, what's in Fredrickson's book, I've gone to the conference, I've heard them all. I just can't imagine suggesting them. So I would say my mindset is, how can I translate what Barbara just said about love? Because I can't talk about that. In a way, and so I get the point, but then I'm looking for ways to weave it in. So I don't just lift the interventions and translate them.
No.
I get the point, and then I think about, and then I experiment.
Right.
So I'm like that anyway. I'm always creative with myself and with clients. So I rarely, because I find what happens is that if you do that and you press it and then they don't like it and then they don't, they think you don't know what you're talking about.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm very leery of pushing them.
Right.
So I'm like a concierge, like if they're interested in meditation, I go find, the 10 things, and I email them and I give them, I deliver it in small bites, and I just, my mindset is that you don't know what your formula is, so you need to be a scientist, you need to experiment, and so here's some things to experiment with.
Right.
That's how I look at it.
Right.
I don't know which one's going to work. And sometimes nothing works. And then you think, well, I don't have the tools. And then I go looking. So I'm really looking for things and trying to match it with people. Like there's a Myers-Briggs for fitness personalities. I don't know if you've seen it, Susan Broom. And so one client who comes from Asia and has never been an exerciser, we took his Myers-Briggs and I took out from the book and I sent it to him. And, it was a really nice profile of what he would like and what he didn't.
Yeah.
That worked, but I haven't used it for anybody else ever.
Right.
Because I have so many jobs, I don't have a big client practice. If I had 30 clients all the time, constantly turning over, I'd have a lot more stories.
Yeah.
So I'm giving you, what I have on the basis of not a big clientele. So you just need to keep that in mind.
Right. What about? So when you do this, do you ask questions or do you share knowledge or do you?
I share a lot. I do teach because people don't know about this stuff.
Right.
So, I talk about positivity making the brain work better.
Yeah.
And why it does that. I had a long conversation recently with a client that went like this. But people, because I said, why do you think positivity hasn't taken off? Like, look at Lasada's work. Amazing science. It doesn't get better than that. I don't know of anything more amazing and brilliant than his butterfly and the math that got him there. First psychologist ever to use nonlinear systems. He said because people think that there's a lot of negative and it ignores the negative. And so I said, okay, so here's the story. It's not that it ignores the negative. The negative is central. I talked about the sailboat. I said the negative is the boat and the rudder. It's the weight of life that grounds you, that keeps you growing, because it's the catalyst for growth in humans. Good things are great, but what forces you to grow is the tough stuff. But the tough stuff, like Keegan's book, In Over Our Heads, if you're too far in over your head, you sink. And you don't grow. So the positive keeps you buoyant and able to cope. And of course now we know that it's a strong predictor of resilience. And so you need it to be resilient. So you need the positivity just to cope with the negative.
Yeah.
So I do that. I talk about that. I talk about why does mindfulness matter? And I say there are 3 things. One is you need to be in the present when you're in the present to get the most out of your life right now. Whether you're in flow or you're savoring. So you need to tap into your own life force, your own motivation, which you can't do if you've got a lot of frenzy. And the third thing is if you can't separate your mind from your brain, you can't see where the error messages are. You can't, so you have to be able to separate, and you can't, if you don't have a mind, and if you can't sit with your mind, you can't get there. So then I say, so that's why you need mindfulness. And so now they're thinking, oh, well, now I understand. So I'm always trying to explain these concepts. Why do strengths matter? Well, only a third of us know what our strengths are. Most of us are focused on our weaknesses. It's the first thing we think of. And when we use them, they're a shortcut. I have some great coaching demos using strengths where breakthroughs happen. I love working with strengths. Because, when people put a strength into service for a weakness, they go, oh my goodness, I didn't know I could use my creativity for something boring like this. Or I didn't know that I could, so I teach a lot. Right. In fact, I'm beginning to create 5-minute webinars about this stuff.
Right.
I just did one today on mindfulness.
Right.
Because I keep telling people about it, and I think, well, I could save myself some time if I could just send them, here's 5 minutes.
Ah, right. So instead of saying it in the coaching session, simply just...
That's where I'm heading.
Right. Oh, that's a good idea.
I tried to do my DNA of Well-Beings once. I've offered it. I did it with the FDA, and I did a whole series with them. Came in and did workshops, and that worked really well as a way to get them thinking. I would prefer to teach first, a little bit, because then if people can stand back, they can say, oh, that's the area where I'm... If you spend a few hours like thinking about well-being and thriving, then you can say, that's what I want to work on. And everybody can pick.
Yeah.
And if you don't, then it takes a little longer to get there because you have to sort of pull it out in other ways.
Yeah.
Because the secret to, one of the many secrets to coaching is working on the right thing first.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
There's plenty to work on.
Yeah.
So I believe we have to teach people about this stuff.
Right.
Because they don't know. And I don't think you just discover it.
No.
There's all the science is there. You don't need to discover it. If you've got self-help with science, for heaven's sakes, teach it to people.
Yeah.
So they can use it.
So what happens? So you tell them. So if it's in the session, you tell them, and then what happens?
Well, they just go off, and that usually leads them to investigate more.
Right. So you tell them, and then you ask a question, or you tell them, and then they comment.
I would say, are you interested? Can I share? Are you interested in this?
Right.
I've written about this, or I've done a webinar on this, or I've got a blog, or I've done a tweet, or
Right.
Do you want? And so then they talk to me about it, and then they're actually much more likely to act on it.
Right.
Much more likely.
When you've told them about it.
Yeah, because what I'm doing, because they may push back, like if you think about it, positivity is nowhere in corporate America. Nowhere. Some of the most compelling science about brain function, team function that has ever existed in organizational development. I mean, why isn't it out there? It's a big frustration for me. So it hasn't landed. So somebody has to translate it.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to do, is translate it into their language. Because the positive psychologists are not talking to the client.
No.
We have to talk to the client.
Yeah.
So I love being in the place of the translator. Right. So I go to the conferences and I sit and listen to the lousy studies, the lousy presentations. They're good ones and they're bad ones. And you say, that's not going to work. That it's painful. It's a lot of work to do that.
Yeah.
But when you do, then you have something to offer.
Yeah.
And I think one of my skills, because I'm corporate, because I was a leader in big companies, because I understand how to talk to a CEO about soft things like meaning and purpose. And like one thing I share that I love, because I've always said all kinds of positivity are not equal. I know that. And I think meaning and purpose comes first, relationship second, if in my unscientific way. And then Seligman told us in the study of the military that the bottom 1% in meaning and purpose, half of them had committed suicide a year later.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Meaning, they all have the same jobs. One military person has this much meaning and purpose. They love their work, they're out fighting in battles, they know their life matters, they will die for their purpose, they are. And then the next person wants to die because they have no meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
Look at the difference. Yeah. Same circumstances.
Yeah.
But the one thrives, the other one gets through PTSD, the other one doesn't. So it's people, that's a self-determining life force.
Yeah.
That you want to find that. And so I think that's really important. I think relationships come next.
Yeah.
I think they're not first, because I think we're born with autonomy. The connection is the balance of it, but it's not the driving force.
Right.
So I personally think meaning comes first, relationships second, then flow and strengths, then day-to-day positivity, and all of that is supported by your physical wellness.
Right.
So I've created my own model basically,
Right.
and that's how I share it.
Yeah.
In my own way.
Right. And when you adapt these things to a client, what's your thoughts on that? You said
what will they?
experience.
I mean, after talking to them for a bunch of hours, what will work?
And how,
what language? You know, they're interested. You know, and then I just offer. With executives, you have to teach.
Right.
Because they don't want to pay you money to facilitate.
Right.
They have high self-efficacy. Their brains work really well. They actually need new ideas and new learning.
Right.
And right now, positive psychology has a lot of them, so it's great fun.
Yeah.
I just you get a sense for what they will resonate with and what they won't, and you have to be really careful. So it's really about tailoring it to what you think they will hear.
Right. And based on that, you choose.
Then I find a way to talk about it, yeah.
Right.
And that, for me, that makes it the cutting edge for me, because I have to translate it to fit them.
Yeah. Right. Let's see.
We're jumping around.
No. Actually, we're following the.
Oh, are we? Okay.
Yeah. What about you said something about relationship. I also have one about your relationship with the client. What do you do to establish a good relationship?
To really kind of get to a place where you know what makes them tick quickly. So really listening. Being in a mode of serving them. I always said to my husband, the thing I'm best at in life is being a wife.
Right.
I'm really good at influencing without it being obvious.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean? Because with your spouse, you know you think that you know what they need, and you're trying to engineer it, to do that. And so I am really good at seeing where the needs are, and just like an example would be the client with diabetes. When I first started with him, he wouldn't talk about his health for longer than this long. We just kept coming back to work. He couldn't stay there.
Mm-mm.
And that was obviously uncomfortable for him.
Yeah.
And now we know why. Recently he just broadcast his whole story to 1,000 people.
Oh.
So it changed.
Yeah.
But I had to hang out talking about his work a lot.
Right.
And I went there, and I know a lot about his area, so I just went there.
Yeah.
And hung out there.
Right.
Even though it wasn't the purpose.
Mm.
But I built the rapport. Another person, some people are too intense. One person, I said to the client, what I see is a thoroughbred. That.
Yeah.
Sort of. And then after an hour, open, energetic. And so I could tell that part was not in play. That's why face-to-face is good.
Yeah.
So I think it's picking up the healthy dynamic and the unhealthy.
Yeah.
Where's the pain? What am I avoiding? What am I not talking about? What makes me energized?
Yeah.
It's like listening for their life force and listening to what's in the way.
Yeah.
And then when you plug into that, then I feel like Mother Lion. I am really in their camp.
Yeah.
I am sending stuff. Can I help you with this? What about that? I'm challenging. I'm saying this. I am. Then I'm like their advocate.
Right.
And I'm cheering them on, and I'm telling them, and they want to tell me when it goes well. You know, they're like kids.
Yeah.
You know, so I shift from a deep listening to who they are and to a fierce advocacy for their welfare.
Right.
And so I take risks, I'm courageous, you know, and so it comes back to a sense of where is their growth edge? Where's the transformation?
Yeah.
And you sort of sniff it out, but you maybe don't even put it on paper, but you just have a sense, and then you try to. They pick what they want to work on, but you look for moments. So in that sense, I'm not just letting it go. I'm creating my own sense of what is needed, and I'm staying with my instincts. I'm not pushing it in that way, but I'm reflecting what I hear somehow.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, what works in coaching and therapy is when the client thinks you really get them better than they're getting themselves.
Yeah.
And then they want to know what you have to say.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
So that's relationship.
Yeah.
That's attunement. That's mirror neurons.
Yeah.
You know, that's so it's like you lose yourself in their presence. I take a lot of notes, I write it all up. Did I get it right?
So do you ask them if you got it right?
Yeah.
Right.
Did I capture it? And I usually do. I usually get it.
Yeah.
So when I write it, it's a few pages. They say, it's all organized. It didn't come out organized. It's all there. It's better organized than what they said.
So when do you write it out? So do you
after the wellness plan, and then we keep after each session. I usually go back in. Sometimes I add a really important email thread. Anything that matters, I put in there, so it becomes like a journal, a record.
Right.
So I really try to capture at a deep level what's going on, where they want to go and why.
Yeah.
So they say that's it, and they don't have to think about it. It's all organized, like a report.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
That's it. So back to organize your mind. I'm really organizing their minds around it.
Yeah.
By my service, and I've always found coaches that work with me that don't do that. Don't send me anything. Don't process it and give me something. I think I don't think I'm getting much, because then I'm left. I've had a positive. It's like, don't quote this because the person will know who this is. I did work with somebody out of the MAP program, and I was so frustrated at the end of sessions because there was no notes, there was no actions, there was no follow up, that I wrote them down myself.
Yeah.
And sent them to myself. I've copied the coach. But I needed to summarize. I needed to capture. I needed to harvest. I needed to know what I was doing. And I really think people want to have a summary. What just happened here? The one client who had a huge breakthrough, we had an amazing session, and he went back way back to early stuff he'd never shared. And really, we then had a whole sense of the transformation. And I spent an hour and a half on the plane writing it all down in the plane, because I knew if I didn't put it down, I'd lose it. I wouldn't remember, and he might not either. I was doing it for myself, actually.
Right.
To see, did I capture it? Because it was so momentous.
Yeah.
So I go the extra mile. When I'm feeling down, I say, okay, which client can I help right now? And I go looking for something, and I send it.
Right.
So I'm like Mother Lion.
Yeah.
Like protecting my cubs.
Right.
You know, I have sort of wifely sense of I want to help them do well.
Yeah.
So that's the energy that I bring.
What about expectancy factors? Do you do something to make the clients, come with good expectations of this is going to work for me?
The two worlds are different. If you take again the obese, the average client, that not an executive client, there I think it's important to share that this has worked before and how it's worked, because they are skeptical, and they say, what does a coach do? I mean, the idea that you organize your mind, or that you need it, talking to somebody? I mean, I can do that with my friends, this is just another friend's conversation. And so it becomes more important to have testimonials and stories, and how did that work, and why did it work? And with executives, they're used to executive coaches, so they know that when you have a great coach, it works well. So you don't really have to talk about that. Then it comes down to, do they like talking to you? Do they get something out of the conversation? In a coaching conversation, the client has to come away with, wow, that was interesting.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to deliver. And I think that's more important. So the first session, this first couple of sessions, they got to say, and then what you write up, it's got to be a wow, that's really good, or that's great, or excellent. And that's really what sells it.
Right.
So I don't think then they think maybe something will happen, but they really don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's session to session.
Yeah.
Then usually 3-4 months later, they go, oh my God, I've transformed. And then they're in.
Yeah, yeah.
So they have to see it.
Right, right.
And they have to see small examples of it each session.
Yeah.
Like, if I have more sessions like that, something could change.
Right, right, right.
So it's really in the moment.
Right,
you know?
yeah. What about how do you make them engaged in the process of changing? Like in between the sessions, what do you do to?
The wellness plan has goals. And I have them do a monthly accountability report. I send them 4 questions.
Like what?
What did you learn this? How did you do in your goals? What was new? What did you learn? What insights did you get? What was challenging? How can I help you?
Right, right, right.
So they then write back.
Right.
So if I don't have a session, I don't keep it up if once they're on a path, because then it starts to feel intrusive, like I already,
Yeah.
I'm on track.
Yeah.
I don't need, if they're busy, you do not want to waste their time.
Yeah.
But when they're in the early days, I get them to send a monthly report.
Right, right.
Because they like to, how am I doing? It gives them a chance to stop and say, how am I doing? Is this working? What? And so usually they write up a few paragraphs, and then it gets them into the habit of telling me when things go well.
Right, right.
So they've got written down stuff, and they write down how it's going in the plan.
Yeah.
And then the monthly report. So accountability is a big deal.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially, people want to be accountable.
Right.
So you have to build that in.
Yeah.
I have one client where I use text reminders. It's a really cool system where I say that one question is, hi Susan, hello from Coach Meg. What's your rating of how well you did fulfilling your life purpose today? 10, 7, 6. Number comes back in her text and it goes into a table.
All right.
Yeah, that's a really nice service.
Yeah, yeah.
So reminders,
Yeah.
texts, accountable. You have to, and then I ask people what will work for you. How often do you want to meet me? How often do you want to report back to me? Do you want to do quick phone check-ins? And usually they like to have an hour session when they need it, and in between, just, mostly email.
Right, right, right.
But there has to be a plan for accountability.
Right, right, right. And when do you agree on these things?
The beginning.
So in the first session or before that?
First or second session. Now the first session is intake, second is planning, second and third, it's written down, how do you want to be accountable? You pick. So here are 3 different ways we could do it.
So you give them a piece of paper with the...
It's written down in their plan.
Right, right.
Accountability and then monthly report,
right,
whatever
right,
they want me to do.
Right, right. Okay.
So I let them pick.
Yeah.
How often.
Yeah.
They usually don't want to write a lot. They're busy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But then when something, like I just got I'll get an email out of the blue. I just did this. Thank you. I wanted to tell you about this. This just came together.
Yeah, yeah.
So they'll reach out in between too.
Right, right, yeah.
I want them to get into a pattern of reporting to me.
Yeah.
Really, just so that they know that there's a reason, that somebody's watching.
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They committed to something, and they're used to everybody reporting to them. So,
yeah.
But people do. So I like to have, where are we going, and then how do you want to be accountable?
Yeah.
And what will work for you?
Right, right, right. And so what's their feedback on your way of working with positive psychology and coaching? What did they say?
Wow. I never knew that would work.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. When they're ready for it.
Right.
Yeah. Because it's a big discovery. It was for me.
Yeah.
When you realize you can control how many positive emotions you have, and that you have to find your own formula, and that if you practice it, it gets better. and that it can change your relationships, it works. So do health behaviors. I mean, the thing about what I do is that the behaviors that I'm recommending to people or that are in the literature are well proven to deliver results.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, we know exercise makes your brain work better. We
Yeah.
really know that now. I mean, we didn't know as much 10 years ago as we know now. We really know that meditation increases positivity. We really know that meaning and purpose improves positivity, that improve, you know, so we know now what things to work on.
Yeah.
So when I recommend and encourage, I know that if they find the right way, it's going to make a difference. If people stop eating sugar and white flour, I mean, you know how much better they feel.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's a miracle.
Yeah.
But they didn't know they'd feel that well. So they eat the bagel. And I mean, you must notice, compared to Denmark, I mean, people eat bagels and pastries, and I mean, it's terrible what people eat at breakfast, and they expect their brains to work.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I talk a lot about the brain.
Right, yeah.
And how the brain has no energy store, so you have to give it good food, which means you have to have the right balance of protein, carbs, and fat
Yeah,
to keep your energy high, so your brain can operate at a high level.
yeah.
And you have to keep feeding it, you know. And so I have a lot. So there's a lot of teaching. I think the thing that I do with positive psychology that others don't is I bring in the physical piece.
Right, right.
Because I think it's as important as the mental.
Yeah.
Well, look at Barbara Fredrickson. She jogs. She's really fit.
Yeah.
She meditates. She knows that if you exercise, you have more positivity.
Yeah.
It's really simple.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, there's no better way to have more positive emotions than go for a walk. You know, go for a run, go for a swim,
Yeah.
go for a hike. You know, go for a yoga class. So I consider that toolbox, and that's, you know, Tony Schwartz and Jim Lair are also.
Yeah.
We're working from the same playbook.
Yeah. And what would you say are the mechanisms? Like if you have to.
Well, so I have a very clear idea about this. So I'll lay out our advanced training. So start with the biology. Self-determination is it's built into our biological wiring. You know, our life force, our motivation, our purpose. Humans were, you know, built. That's a biological phenomenon. As DC says, it's organismic.
Yeah.
It's really who we are. Which means that human beings were designed to self-determine, self-actualize. So we're tapping into that. Okay. Self-actualizing means you have to grow and develop. So then the next building block is Keegan, which means you have to move from subjective to objective, from being a teenager and thinking, my parents don't know everything. I thought they did. They're not, you know. So you know, you move, and then as an adult, you get more and more objective until you're. Do you know the Keegan model? Until you're self-transforming.
Yeah.
So it's until you're self-transforming, where you don't even, you know, your ego doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Because every time you sit down with someone, you change. So you're doing, you know. So you're even you is subjective, or you know, like you're not. You can't be subject to you. So I think the growth, the gravitational, the equivalent of gravity for change is the change in mindset, where you begin to be more objective about what's going on in your brain. And so change is about that. So coaching conversations are all about changing mindset. That's it.
Yeah.
So that the behavior changes, so the mindset changes, so that the people change, transform. So change is about mindset and behavioral change together.
Right.
And Keegan is the brilliant, you know, I mean, he didn't discover subject-object, but he laid it out. Well, I guess he did discover the idea of subject-object. That's not true. He didn't discover the stages of adult development. So so self-determining to become more objective and grow. So those are two building. Okay, now then, what are the conditions that make that happen? That's tough to do. And what gets in the way? So what gets in the way is people don't have the capacity to change. And positive psychology offers the way to build self-efficacy and resilience so that you're willing to change your mindset. Because some people do it kicking and screaming. It's too hard. You don't want to outgrow your box.
Mm-mm.
Who will you connect with?
Yeah.
Who will you be? Scary. So I see positive psychology as there's twin engines for this growth. One is tapping into self-determination, because it gets buried. You remember Fredrickson's quote that the sparkle of positive feelings awakens motivation. So motivation is our life force,
Yeah.
but it's asleep if we don't have capacity and confidence.
Right, yeah.
So coaching is about building capacity and confidence so that the self-determination's unleashed so that the change can happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how I see it.
Right.
So I see positive psychology as not the end. And I think until positive psychology really tackles adult development and change in the mindset, it's not a complete model. And that's what Ed Dece's really saying.
Right.
It's not explaining anything.
Mm-mm.
So I would say then, my heroes are DC and Ryan, self-determination, Keegan, because it's the adult development, and then positive psychology gives you the buoyancy to do that. And then I would add to that more recently the idea of the butterfly.
Yeah.
So that these are complex systems. So each of these has multiple parts. And so there's not one button to push. That button push, out comes motivation. Button push, out comes confidence. Button push, out comes, you have to see it as a system.
Yeah.
And a stable but chaotic system. And so as a coach, there's multiple things that make each of these happen.
Yeah.
And so you have to have multiple ways to make each of these happen. Multiple ways to get hold of motivation, but it's there. You just have to dig it out.
Yeah.
Multiple ways to build capacity, and then multiple ways to change the mindset.
Yeah.
So that's really, and then the relationship itself improves capacity because we radiate empathy. People take on empathy. Okay, I can accept myself. I can be self-compassionate. I can let go of the past. A negative past puts your feet in concrete and you can't change because you're just,
Yeah.
So the relationship models the confidence, the calm, the zest, the humor, the empathy, the compassion. So when we present that to the client, they take it up.
Yeah.
And so then they borrow it for a bit. And so they're a little bit more self-empathetic, they're a little bit less self-judgmental, they're a little bit more zestful, they're a little bit more humor. The relational dynamic, is how people grow.
Yeah.
Relationships make us grow. So coaching is like the design of a relationship that is at its very peak.
Yeah.
In terms of fostering growth.
Yeah.
Which is why I said I'm a really good wife, because I'm really good at helping my mate grow with it while but making it autonomous.
Yeah.
And so the secret of being a coach is to maximize the growth with the most autonomy.
Yeah.
And do it in a way that's behind the scene, sometimes you're pushing, but sometimes you plant the seeds and then they come back and say, oh, I just discovered.
Yeah.
So that's my model
Right.
of it.
And how do you develop yourself as a professional?
Well, I've learned from Keegan, in Over Our Heads, if you've got stress, you're supposed to grow. It's a sign that you're in over your head, which means your current model of the world is not sufficient for the challenge. And I have a really good example, which I wouldn't make public beyond a few people, but just give you an example. So one of my hats is nudging along a national consortium of people to build standards. And there are many people who have different opinions than me and others. And it's very difficult to do this, to have whole industry agree on things.
Yeah.
And it became the most stressful thing I was working on. So I went to Jennifer Garvey-Berger, who did her PhD under Bob Keegan. And I was already doing a masterclass for the Institute on Bob Keegan, so I read about her and I asked her, I did an interview with her, and then I said, would you be willing to coach me? And at the time I didn't quite know what I would work on, but then I had this stress. So what she taught me is that the stress was coming from the fact that I was in a self-authoring mode. My ego was attached to the outcome. So I was so afraid that this thing was going to fail, and I was going to be the reason it failed because I wasn't a good enough leader. And it was creating so much stress I couldn't cope with it. I was ready to quit.
Yeah.
And what she taught me is that in that part of my life, I have to let go of the outcome, and I have to just be self-transforming. I have to get myself up to a higher level, a higher orbit. I can't attach myself to the outcome. I basically have to move into a mode of I just turn up and I do my best, and I don't worry about the future. I can't, because if I try to, she said, look, this is a ship on the ocean with no driver. Who knows where it's going to land?
Yeah.
You can't control it, so you can't attach yourself. So she really taught me about that interface, but she also taught me that I shouldn't let go of the ego because it's driving me in some parts of my life.
Yeah.
And so I shouldn't say don't, throw your ego away. So she really helped me see that I am where I am, and the stresses are where I need to grow.
Yeah.
And that when I'm feeling stress, I reach out.
Right.
And because that's a sign that I'm not seeing something I need to see. I need to change my worldview.
Yeah.
So that I've really learned, and that's not positive psychology. It's not. And until positive psychology tackles adult development, it's not fully grown up as a field.
What would you say about positive psychology coaching? What's your opinion about that?
I don't think. I mean, if the purpose, I don't think it's a term for itself. People want to grow in certain domains of their life, and so they think of that. They think of coaching around what part of my area in life do I want to get better at. So, I would say it's a new name for life coaching, which is that I have a meaningful, purposeful life with great relationships, and I'm thriving. But I don't think positive psychology is the end. I think thriving is the end, but then it's what domain. So I think you have to tie it to a specialty. So I would say, I often say, health and wellness coaches are an army of coaches who are positive psychology coaches.
Right.
Because we use it. It's baked into what we do. If you read our textbook, if you read what I've written, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's all over the place. It's been pulled and with all the threads are woven into what we do. It isn't what we do. It is a huge, as I say, the positivity clears away the underbrush, the little obstacles, and then you're left with the big ones.
Yeah.
And so then you focus on the big ones. So the little ones are, so positivity clears the junk.
Yeah.
And then you can focus on the big stuff. That's how I view it. And then the big stuff needs whatever toolbox you use. So I don't see positive psychology coaching as a niche of coaching. I think people want coaches for their work, for their leadership, for their health. And that it informs all coaching.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the model that I just presented to you isn't just linked to health. I think you could use it I don't push it as a model for other areas of coaching because I don't work in those areas, and I find people, I think there are common elements, like you could take my model and someone in executive coaching would say, yeah, that is sort of it, but it's missing this piece.
Yeah.
So I think positive psychology coaching should be baked into all coaching.
Right.
And thoughtfully.
Yeah.
And the biggest contribution is that it defines what is thriving.
Yeah.
Because now we have something to aim for as coaches.
Yeah.
Just like what is great leadership.
Yeah.
And I think that's hugely valuable. But it doesn't give you the path there. There's intervention here, intervention, it's not a full thing. And it doesn't cover the relational dynamic that leads someone to change.
No.
So it's part of the story.
Yeah.
It's a big part. And it's a beautiful part, and it's a critical part.
Yeah. Are there things that we have not talked about that are important to understand the way that you work?
Well, my next frontier is how the brain works. And I can give you an advance copy, the PDF of the book, and we can have another conversation about that. And my talk at the Harvard conference, which is not ready yet, I have a psychiatrist working with me, and I'm basically going to say, okay, Craig, here's what I do. What am I doing to the client's brain?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to have him say, we know this, but we don't know this.
Right.
And that's the beginning for me of the biology of coaching.
Yeah.
What are we doing to the brain?
Right.
And that's, for me, because in my last biotech company, it was neuroscience based. So for me, it's really cool.
Yeah.
For the neuroscience, well, I was thinking about it from the perspective of Alzheimer's and dementia and, pain and that kind of thing. Or cancer, brain cancer, or glaucoma. I was thinking about it from the medicalization of neuroscience. But how neuroplasticity develops, what conditions make it develop, how do we organize people's thinking so their brains make new connection, how do insights lead to change. The neuroscience can explain some, not all, but in medicine, if we can show doctors, if we can explain how coaching changes the brain in a way that they go, then you do need a 45-minute session, not a 2-minute session.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You do need someone that's well trained.
Yeah.
That is something my patient needs. I got it.
Right, yeah.
That for me is the next.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of coaches care about what we do to people's brains. Carol had somebody that was with us when I was talking about this, and she said, "But I already know it works. I already know it improves the brain. I don't need to know the data.
Mm-hmm.
I know that. I know I'm an intuitive. I don't need to know the science. So that's not going to work for everybody.
Mm-mm.
A lot of people aren't going to care. They say, of course we change the brain. I don't need to see pictures. I don't need to know how you do it. They don't care. But I do. I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
That we, because the way I see it is that when you hit on the science that underlies how something works, it's solid.
Yeah.
Like I said to Barbara Fredrickson, is positivity solid? If I go and coach all these people on it, are you going to tell me 5 years from now, whoops, it's something else. It's not positive emotions. It's, can we really stand on this? Like, is this table going to fall over or is it going to last? And I said it jokingly, but, she said, yeah, this is going to last. This is, when you find science that lasts, like gravity, and, from the standpoint of helping people, it's going to work.
Yeah.
You do. And that is, and I think psychology in general has lacked biology.
Yeah.
So people can say, this works because. And so that's what I think is cool about science and coaching, is that when we really when we are standing on not just like one study, but a body of literature that all leads to, this is it, then we as coaches are standing on solid ground, and then we know that our clients can be successful. That's how I view the science.
Yeah.
So I think, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a professional scientist, but I spent all those years working with Nobel Prize winners, with researchers who are really probably too much that way.
Yeah.
Too much data driven. And good science is great. Great science is great. I mean it. And so when you find a great piece of science, like positive emotions, like Lasada's butterfly, like self-determination, wow. I mean, that is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I love it. I love that.
Yeah.
And so the neuroscience is really the next thing.
Right.
Because I think that, and that'll go on for decades.
Yeah.
Which means I'm not going to be bored.
No.
For a long time.
What advice would you give to others who are interested in positive psychology and coaching?
Play with it for yourself. Read the books. Like when we teach it, it's like a master. People have to read the papers, they read the books, they write on it, they coach using it. Get in, dive in, and use it, because you have to experience it for yourself. You have to. Can I tell you one story?
Sure.
So, Carol Kaufman was there, so she can tell you her version of it. We were in Kuala Lumpur. We had done 2 days of workshops in Shanghai and 2 in Malaysia. It was the last Friday afternoon, very end of a long week. And Carol and I came up with the being of coaching based on our theory for the intuitive dance we call relational flow. That's something else you might want to read about. So we came up with theory that the best part of coaching is when the coach and client are both in flow together.
Yeah.
And there's now co-flow. A number of people wrote about it at the same time. So we figured out what is the way of being of a coach that allows relational flow, and we taught it. And then I brought her with me to do these workshops. So we had just finished teaching about the being skills of the coaching presence. And so one of the participants said, would you do one more demonstration? I said, okay. So they had all done via character strengths. And so Alexis stood up, and she wanted to work with me. She's from Singapore, and she's really shifty, young, nervous, couldn't hold my gaze.
Right.
Could not.
No.
She was just, And so she decided that what she wanted was to be warmer. And she decided that she wouldn't focus on work because her personal life, it mattered to her that people close to her felt her warmth and caring, and she wasn't sure they did. So I asked her what her character strengths were. And so we went so one of them was social intelligence. So I said, and she also wanted to be like Carol and me. She wanted warmth and business-like at the same time.
Yeah.
Because in Asia, the business women were cold.
Right.
Not warm.
Right.
So she wanted that combination.
Right.
So I said to her, so then my idea was, how do I translate social intelligence into this? So I said, say after me, you can count on me. You know what I mean by that? She said, you can count on me. I said, you can count on me. You can count. Anyway, 5 times she stopped. And she looked at me, and the tears streamed down her face. And she said, you can count on me. She had tapped into her social caring, her loyalty. And everybody watched. She never was the same again. She lost that jittery lack of groundedness. It went away because she pulled on her strength.
Yeah.
That's how powerful these strengths are.
Yeah.
And that's when science works.
Yeah.
Because Chris would say, use the strength for something new.
Yeah.
Okay? Strength, problem.
Yeah.
Put strength to problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Translate strength into... So my input was how to use the strength creatively.
Yeah.
In that moment. And that her jitteriness was her problem. So if I could get her to slow down and say in the right tone, in my tone, she would. She was mirroring me, but it took her, and she was tapping into it. So that took a few minutes. Big problem, huge challenge. You could coach for days, weeks on that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How do I get warmer?
Yeah.
Well, experiment,
Yeah.
Instead, we just went to the strength and then used it.
Yeah.
And then it came alive. So that's what I mean when it works. The scientists are right when you see that.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't have known to use it like that.
No.
I wouldn't have. That's the intervention. Intervention used strength in a new way.
Yeah.
Okay, so I used it.
Yeah.
Not the way they were thinking.
No.
But I used it.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean about, so that's why you can't just take it like they do it, because they're not coaching people. They're not in the trenches.